The presidential villa in Abuja, under President Bola Tinubu, issued an executive directive granting a full presidential pardon to Nnamdi Kanu. The directive was prepared through appropriate administrative channels and transmitted to federal ministries, legal departments, security agencies, correctional authorities, and other government offices responsible for implementing the order. The document contained detailed instructions regarding the immediate execution of the presidential decision. Copies of the directive were dispatched through official government communication systems to ensure that all relevant institutions received the order without delay. Government officials acknowledged receipt of the directive and began reviewing its contents. Legal departments within the federal government initiated the first stage of implementation by examining documentation attached to the presidential order. Administrative offices reviewed case files, detention records, court documents, and related materials connected to Kanu's detention history. Existing records were compared with provisions contained in the directive to ensure consistency and accuracy. The presidential order instructed relevant authorities to remove all restrictions associated with detention. Government legal offices updated internal records and prepared official notices reflecting the new status established by the presidential pardon. Documentation relating to previous proceedings was organized and archived in accordance with established administrative procedures. Federal ministries responsible for coordination and implementation scheduled internal meetings to review the directive. Officials discussed timelines, reporting requirements, and procedural responsibilities assigned to various departments. Written instructions were distributed to ensure that each agency understood its role in carrying out the presidential order. Correctional authorities received certified copies of the directive through official communication channels. Prison administrators reviewed the order and immediately began gathering documents associated with detention records. Administrative personnel compiled identification records, custody files, intake reports, movement logs, and other materials required for processing. Officials responsible for correctional administration examined the directive to determine the exact procedures necessary for implementation. Records were reviewed to verify personal information, detention history, and administrative documentation maintained during the period of custody. Staff members worked through existing files to ensure that all information was complete and properly documented. The presidential directive also contained provisions authorizing immediate release and signing of release documents. Administrative departments within the correctional facility received notification regarding the immediate release component and were instructed to begin preliminary signatory reviews. Officials responsible for institutional security examined existing procedures that would govern implementation of the directive. Custodial officers opened internal review processes designed to evaluate documentation requirements, authorization procedures, and reporting obligations connected to the release documents. Departments responsible for processing, records management, and oversight exchanged communications regarding the presidential order and steps required to implement its provisions. Throughout the day, government agencies maintained regular communication with one another. Administrative officers exchanged correspondence confirming receipt of the directive and providing updates regarding implementation activities. Internal memoranda were circulated among departments involved in the process. The Ministry of Justice reviewed legal implications associated with the presidential pardon. Government lawyers examined statutory procedures governing the implementation of executive clemency and prepared documentation necessary to support execution of the directive. Officials ensured that all actions remained consistent with established administrative requirements. As legal reviews continued, records connected to detention status were updated across relevant government databases. Administrative personnel verified identifying information and entered revised records into official systems. Existing files were reviewed line by line to confirm accuracy before modifications were finalized. Correctional administrators simultaneously continued preparations related to the release process. Staff members reviewed institutional procedures governing releases authorized through executive directives. Personnel verified identification records, custody documentation, and administrative files maintained within correctional facilities. Government departments responsible for records management organized physical and electronic documentation connected to the case. Archived materials were retrieved, reviewed, and cross-checked against current records. Officials ensured that all files reflect consistent information before implementation advanced to the next stage. The immediate release provision required coordination among multiple agencies. Custodial specialists reviewed regulatory frameworks governing discharges and document signing arrangements. Documentation requirements were identified, and officials began preparing administrative frameworks necessary for processing activities. Senior government officials requested periodic updates from departments involved in implementation. Reports were submitted outlining actions completed, activities currently underway, and tasks remaining before full execution of the directive could be achieved. These reports allowed authorities to monitor progress and identify any administrative requirements requiring additional attention. Legal representatives associated with the matter received formal notification confirming the issuance of the presidential pardon. Official correspondence was transmitted through recognized communication channels, ensuring that all parties possessed copies of the directive and related documentation. Within correctional administration offices, personnel prepared records required for concluding custody-related procedures. Identification documents were reviewed and verified. Administrative files were examined to ensure that all institutional records were complete and properly organized. Government communication units prepared internal notices regarding implementation activities. Departments responsible for public administration coordinated information sharing among agencies participating in the process. Officials maintained regular contact to ensure that instructions contained in the directive were executed according to schedule. As implementation progressed, legal departments continued updating records and preparing supporting documentation. Custodial offices maintained reviews connected to the release documents, while correctional authorities continued organizing materials associated with detention and release procedures. Government databases were updated to reflect administrative changes authorized by the presidential order. Records management personnel reviewed entries across multiple systems and verified consistency among agencies responsible for maintaining official information. Administrative officers assigned to the implementation process monitored deadlines established within the directive. Departments reported progress through official channels, allowing senior officials to track completion of assigned responsibilities. Documentation generated during implementation was recorded and preserved for future reference. By the end of the first phase of implementation, federal agencies had received the presidential directive, reviewed the contents of the order, assigned operational responsibilities, updated relevant records, organized supporting documentation, and initiated the procedures necessary to carry out the presidential decision. Legal departments had completed preliminary reviews, correctional authorities had assembled custody-related documentation, security agencies had begun work relating to the immediate release, and administrative offices had established reporting structures to oversee continued implementation. The implementation process moved to its final stage when correctional authorities in Sokoto received official instructions relating to the presidential directive. Administrative officers within the correctional system reviewed documentation transmitted through government communication channels and completed all verification procedures. Reference numbers, authorization signatures, transmission records, custody documents, intake reports, movement logs, and administrative files were cross-referenced and confirmed. Following verification, administrative personnel entered changes into databases, modified custody records, and prepared official release papers. Authorization documents were examined, security personnel coordinated with administrative staff, and designated officials confirmed compliance with all procedural requirements. With documentation verified and administrative requirements fulfilled, correctional authorities completed the procedures necessary to conclude custody status, ensuring that all required paperwork was fully signed, processed, and recorded in government systems, bringing the custody phase of the implementation process to its formal conclusion.